Okay, I should have started this section way earlier, but we had to deal with all kinds of fun animal-related things. So, we're talking about CRT, which I'm sure if you have parents who watch Fox News, you are absolutely tired of hearing about CRT. And Fox News is specifically what we're going to be talking about. Lakakwa, thank you for resubscribing. Been a hard few days. Thank you for being an awesome presence. Well, I don't think that my presence is a present. I think it's more of a terrible surprise that you really didn't want in the shower. But, you know, here we are. Here we are. So, let's get into the fan art section first before we talk about Fox News' latest debacle. From Invader... Oh, God, they changed their name. I cannot say the last part of their name. I can show you what it is, but those words are war words, and I cannot speak them on this platform. But from Invader, you're a horrible person for almost tricking me to saying it. Thank you very much for the fan art of Beach Nekosaurus chilling out at the beach. And then from Fat GLaDOS, we have Merakai Nekosaurus said, I seem to need some help in the luck department, so hopefully these help. And there are 3 variations of them to go through. And I think these are very cute. And people in the chat are telling me, say it, you coward. No! Costs 50,000 channel points to even begin that terrible, terrible mission of yours. As always, thank you all for your fan art submissions. If you want your fan art to be shown on the channel, the best way to do so is dropping it into the fan art section of the Discord. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please consider doing so. If you haven't checked out the various ways you can support this channel down in the description, please consider doing so. We even have merch now, if you would like to choose a side in the Great War, the Owo Wars, where the correct side is the Owo side, but I'm not going to judge you based on the side you choose. At least that's what I'm telling you right now. On that note, let's get into this. Now, what is this video? Well, this is a Colorado father explaining why critical race theory keeps racism on life support. And he's explaining this on Fox News, which, for those of you who don't know, is not really a legitimate news organization so much as they are news-flavored entertainment. In fact, some of their hosts, such as Tucker Carlson, you legally cannot take them seriously. It has been a legal defense used by Fox News, so if you just, for some reason, are under a rock and are not familiar with the brand of entertainment that Fox News is, I came across this video because it was an advertisement on a video that I was watching. I forget which video it was, but this came up, and I was like, oh my god, it's a 5-minute Fox News segment being played as a YouTube ad. Guess I need to go ahead and watch this. I guess it's a thing that I should probably pay attention to. So, let's go ahead.
Race theory moving America.
I need to actually increase the volume. There we go.
Is critical race theory...
Apparently I need to increase the volume even more. Open volume mixer. Why is it so low? That's as high as it'll go. The sound mixing on this is just awful then. So I guess we have to go here in the filters and increase the gain. Alright, Fox News, let's go.
Moving America backwards?
So it's critical race theory moving America backwards. That is what is being said here on Fox and Friends. So let's go ahead and see what the Peanut Gallery has to say about critical race theory.
The argument one father, who is the descendant of slaves, made as he explained the harsh reality of the controversial teachings to his school board.
Now, I love how they describe the father as a descendant of slaves. Chances are, if you are an African-American in the United States, you are a descendant of slaves. You could have just said he's an African-American, but you specifically had to point out, he's a descendant of slaves! Let me go ahead and explain right now. If you're a descendant of slaves, it really doesn't change much of your outlook on... It really shouldn't change much your outlook on life. Now, there are things closer in proximity to you that probably, more than likely, have a huge effect on you. Things like Jim Crow. You probably have parental figures or grandparents who lived through the Jim Crow era. But as far as being a child of, you know, a descendant of slaves, I'm sure that that matters in terms of heritage, in that heritage is something that a lot of people do take pride in. But in terms of what effect it actually has on you, that effect is potentially minimal. As far as the slavery portion is concerned specifically. Now, let's go ahead and talk about this real quick. Let's see.
I am not oppressed.
Okay? You, as an individual, not being oppressed does not account for all of the myriads of ways in which people who are African American in the United States are disadvantaged. But go on, Derek.
I'm not oppressed, and I'm not a victim. I have 3 children. They are not oppressed either, although they are victims. Racism in America would by and large be dead today if it were not for certain people and institutions keeping it on life support.
Like Fox News? Now, I'm sure that he's talking about, like, the education system and critical race theory, despite the fact that that's not really taught outside of college law classes, but, you know.
Sadly, one of those institutions is the American education system.
Yep, there it is.
That father, Derek Wilburn, joins us now. Derek, I saw the whole thing. It's incredibly motivating. I know I speak for all of us. What a powerful statement. You said, my kids are victims. They could be victims of their own ignorance, of their own laziness. And you pounded home the fact that with teaching kids to feel like they are oppressed is ultimately the worst thing you can do. What was the impetus for stepping up to that podium for you?
So wait, I'm actually curious. In what ways are children being taught that they are oppressed? Because I don't really think that that's happening all that much, and I don't hear from many people that is what's happening. Now, if you are taught in your school in a history class that, you know, we at one point participated in slavery, and that the effects of that slavery, mind the effects of it, not your personal mindset. Your personal mindset is not going to be changed by that terribly much. That's going to be a product of how you orient yourself. But the actual effects of that slavery are still felt around. Things like generational wealth are lower in African American societies because there have been various points in time where they have not been able to garner as much wealth. And this is a thing backed up by statistics. Generally speaking, if you are white in America, your likelihood of having inherited generational wealth is infinitely higher. And it doesn't mean that white people just work that much harder than black people in the United States. It has to do with the amount of time people have actually been on a level playing field. We might be having a different conversation here in 100 years. Very likely we'll have a different conversation here in 100 years. But right now, there are people alive today who were dealing with Jim Crow. But, you know, let's go on.
You, Derek.
Every cloud has its silver lining. And one of the silver linings of this year and a half of COVID mania has been with children at home, doing learning from home, doing schooling from home. More and more parents are looking at their kids' schoolwork and saying, you know, what's really going on down there at that school? That was.
You know, I'm just going to say this right now. Not every parent has an education degree, and not every parent is going to be able to make heads or tails of what is actually being taught in their school or why. There are parents who, when they hear that a science curriculum is being taught that does not include a 6,000-year-old Earth, freak the hell out. Because their pastor says that they should. There are parents that hear things like critical race theory and immediately think that it's saying that white people are evil, and they freak out as a result of here. Remember, I live in an area where people still fly Confederate flags everywhere, despite the fact that they are the quintessential participation trophy. Been there, done that. The fact that parents can see the education material does not mean that they're going to be able to understand all of it, but continue on, Derek.
built with my tax dollars and that's funded with my tax dollars, and started to take a closer look. And that's what happened to me. I started showing up at school board meetings in my district and in other districts around our city and taking a closer look at what's happening. And dozens of other parents have begun to do the same thing. So what they used to be able to slide in under the radar without parents really knowing, they no longer can. And when this CRT came around, I got to looking at it and said, not in my school, and began showing up.
Okay. Yeah, can you explain what CRT is, or potentially, can you explain in which way CRT has manifested in your school? I'm willing to believe that you believe that CRT has reared its ugly head in your school in some way, shape, or form, but I would really like to know the specific way in which it manifested, because typically I either see strawmans of what critical race theory actually is in an academic sense, or more often, I hear incredibly vague allusions to what might be being said. I remember at one point hearing somebody say that they were mad because schools were teaching kids that if they wanted to be the best version of themselves, then they should be someone else. And I had no idea what that meant. And you know, I asked for clarification, but I didn't get anything. I got, well, I mean what I said is what I got. And that statement alone means nothing to me. Because of my time on the internet, I want to say that it was talking about trans people. How to be the best version of yourself is to be, you know, a gender that you don't normally perform as, and that could have been a problem to this particular parent. But I could never find out. And I wasn't going to press the topic more than that, because this was a real-life conversation. And in real life, it's not like Twitter where we get to go at each other's throats forever. In real life, adults back down when they realize that a conversation is becoming circular, because there's no point in continuing said conversation after there's really not. Like, that's just kind of a thing you learn when you're an adult. At least some of us do. Twitter.
Not my school, not my kids. I'm also Hispanic, and I think it's so important that minorities step up who know that this is destructive. I can't agree with you more that it's so important that we teach our kids that they're not victims. The whole premise of CRT is that it's supposed to bring about racial harmony. Aren't we seeing more divisions?
Wait,
Aren't
no. CRT isn't about bringing apart racial harmony. Nothing about CRT is about bringing racial harmony. What the fuck? Let me give you an example of what critical race theory does. Critical race theory is about analyzing what ways that racism has piloted various aspects of society despite individual people not necessarily being racist. So an example of historical racism that CRT would analyze, and I've said this in a previous episode, I'll say it again. Let's say you've got a bank, okay? And a bank is deciding whether or not they're going to give out a loan to an African-American person in the 1930s. Now, the redlining that was happening around that time would have put this African-American individual in a sector that the bank would not give a loan to, meaning that they would not be leaving that sector because they wouldn't be moving to a new location in order to leave that red-lined sector. And likely the places they'd be able to afford would also be other red-line sectors. And if you've ever rented versus owning a house, you know that in many cases, owning a house can just be cheaper than renting. But getting the capital to even own that, or like do the down payment on that house, there's where you run into issues. Now, the bank is not going to be denying this person a loan because they're black. That's not what the bank is doing, technically. What they're doing is they're going to use one aspect to determine whether or not they should give the loan, and one of the aspects is going to be geographical location. And the geographical location of this person would be in a red-lined area. This area is a place where the bank would not give out a loan. Now, it just so happens that these red-lined areas are comprised primarily of minority groups. Hispanic people who immigrated here, African Americans who were descendants of slaves. These groups, by and large, are the ones that inhabit these red-lined areas. So while technically the bank is not denying you that loan because you're black, what's in effect happening is it is because you're black. Because the fact that you're black increased the likelihood exponentially that you would be in one of those redlined areas, because the next generation comes along and they live in that redlined area too, and they don't get to get out of it either. And the next generation comes along and they don't get to get out of it either. So you keep money sinking yourself in these redline districts, and it prevents you from being able to do things like accumulate generational wealth. And that generational wealth, that ability to engage in like home ownership and things like that, those are things that are not as experienced by those minority communities in the 30s, and that has effects on people going forward. If you are part of a family that has owned their own homes for several generations, the outlook and your prospects individually are going to be much higher than a family that has been stuck in a single apartment for, however many generations, or even worse, have had to apartment hop for many generations, because that's the thing that happens to a lot of us too, where we have to constantly try to go for the cheapest apartments available. We have to hop to do so. So CRT looks at the situation and goes, the individual banker, the bank, they may not be racist, because the banker's not looking at the person and going, well, you're black, so I'm not giving you the loan. But CRT analyzes it and goes, but actually, it is because the person was black that they were in a red-lined district, and the fact that they were in a red-lined district is what prevented them from being able to get that loan. And their family going forward have been negatively affected by this because of the inability to engage in home ownership earlier, to engage in that investment earlier, and to begin accumulating generational wealth. CRT looks at that as a matter of a system. It says, hey, this system had racism in it, and that created a problem for the people going forward. CRT is a lens of legal analysis. There's nothing about that is attempting to create harmony among the races. It's not like you go into law school and you start studying critical race theory, and they sit you down with your white, brown, yellow, and other members of various races and say it's time to sing Kumbaya so we can try to get reparations from all the white folks in the room. That's not a thing that happens with CRT, because that's not its goal. Now, that's a straw man that Fox News and other organizations have put forward a lot where CRT is concerned, but that's not what CRT is. It doesn't care about you as an individual. It doesn't think that you as an individual person are any more or less a problem as far as racism is concerned. You as an individual are not part of the conundrum. The systems you either participate in or have no choice but to, be a part of, those are the things that CRT looks at. Schools, because of this previous redlining, these same geographical locations will be the places that are not able to fund schools very much, because schools are funded primarily by via housing taxes, and less money is going into housing taxes if everybody is renting low-income apartments. This means that the area itself ends up being a low-income area, and low-income areas have less money to put towards schooling. Critical race theory looks at this and goes, oh, hold on. So this black person who's not able to accumulate generational wealth because of a system is also being educated by an underfunded organization because of a similar system that's both, they're both based in that previous amount of redlining that went on. And then you go forward and you wonder, well, what are their children going to be like? What are their children's children going to be like? How long or how far does this impact those generations? And if you can have positive impacts from your previous generations, you can have negative impacts from your previous generations. That's what CRT does. And hopefully I didn't spend too much time on it.
Making kids more obsessed with race when they don't even care about it?
You're exactly right. The agenda they're trying to put in place is doing the exact opposite of that which they claim to be in favor of. So critical race theory, at its core, critical race theory is claiming that race is not so much biological, but a social construct.
Well, yeah, race is a social construct. I hate to tell you this, 110%, but genetically, there is more variance within, within white people. There is more genetic similarity with us and some African Americans than there are within other various white people. Like, the idea of race, for those who don't know, the idea of what a race is was established before we had any idea what genetics were. If you look up the origins of the word Caucasian, it predates our understanding of genetics by a country mile. We did not have the proper tools to analyze what biologically made us us when these concepts were coined and when these concepts were solidified in the social zeitgeist. Yes, your race is a social construct. There are biological differences between you and other people, and there are commonalities between these various groupings of people, but the concept of race, as it exists, is a socially constructed phenomenon.
A social construct that was put in place predominantly by the Caucasian majority to keep the ethnic minority, the colored people, the people of color, oppressed and in some ways subservient.
All right, so I have a question. I'm just going to throw this out to the audience. I'm going to throw it out to the people at Fox News, assuming that any of them are going to watch a random ass slime on the internet debunk their stupid nonsense. Is a Jewish person white? Is an Irish person white? Depending on who you ask, and most importantly, depending on how far you go back in time, the answer is different. Most Jewish people today, you look at them and you're like, yeah, they're white. Look at Ben Shapiro. Yeah, he's white. Look at most people who are Irish today. You look at them, yeah, they're white. Why? Duh, they're white. Well, why does it matter? That was not the case historically. What was and wasn't white was largely determined by other people. If you want to sit here and say that race was not socially constructed, you have to account for these things. If you want to sit here and say that this was not organized as a method of, at the very least, categorizing people and then subjugating them based on those categorizations later on down the road, at the very least, then you have to account for the fact that for the longest time, we had issues with Irish people and we didn't call them white. Like, you have to account for those things. These are things that happened in history. And these things only make sense through the lens of race as a social construct that is as fluid as the people determining it within the social zeitgeist.
And my whole point was, I'm not oppressed at all. I live in a beautiful home in Colorado Springs, which I refinanced last week. And I had mortgage companies and banks tripping over themselves, trying to give me their business. Not a one of them saw that check box that said African American and said, sorry, we don't do business with your kind.
Because they didn't do that historically either, at least not in such a blatant way in many cases. Now, the further back you go, the likelihood of that happening is increasingly high. But remember, it's not about the color of your skin as a biological determining mechanism. It is about the likelihood of your social categorization of people being more or less advantaged, and how those advantages and disadvantages manifest. You can say that you individually, as an individual person, are not oppressed. And cool, that's great. I'm not telling you you are. I'm not going to sit here and say, no, you definitely are oppressed. No, it's likely you might not be. You're in a very wonderful position, and I applaud you for that. That is a great thing, and is a thing to be proud of. And dear God, the monitor on your desk is tiny. How do you see anything on that? Anyway, depending on where you happen to be, the color of your skin likely will have a determining factor in many outcomes in your life. That is something that we know as a matter of statistics. The likelihood that if you get imprisoned, that it will have a longer sentence. There is an aspect of your skin color that goes into that. The likelihood of you getting pulled over by the police in the first place, there is an aspect of your skin color that goes into that. The likelihood of getting a job in many times is more or less likely based on the name that you have written down and how white it may or may not sound, how palatable it might sound to somebody who's accustomed to suburbia. These are things that we have largely analyzed, and we have been able to determine statistically are factors in the way society operates. You as an individual, this is the thing with statistics. If African American people make up 15% of the population, right? 13% of the population. And 35% of them, hell, 65% of them, we'll go with that one. Fun. We'll play with big numbers today. 65% of them are not able to accumulate generational wealth. These are numbers that I'm making up, but it's for a point here specifically. If 65% of them are not able to experience thing A, it is a matter of statistical fact that the other people in those statistics can or do experience the thing that the majority can. Congratulations. You as an individual succeeded, and that is a wonderful thing. But statistically, we already knew you existed. We already knew you existed. And I can understand being proud of that. Be proud of your personal successes. You did it. It's a thing to be happy about. It's a thing to pass on to your children. But if you exist as one of the 5%, 6%, 7%, maybe even 10% of people who are able to experience this wonderful thing, understand that you've already been accounted for in the data within that percentage, and there is another percentage of people who do not or cannot experience those wonderful successes that you have done so. The fact that there is more generational wealth amongst predominantly white families, the fact that homeownership is more common among predominantly white families in America, the fact that their sentences via the police are shorter predominantly compared to African Americans dealing with the exact same offenses in the exact same districts with the exact same histories. Histories as far as legal concerns are there, mind you. These are points of analysis that have to be factored in. I'm so happy that you as an individual have done a wonderful job with you and your family. You've already been accounted for in the data. It not happening to you does not mean it doesn't happen to other people.
That's never happened to me. Those days are 50 years ago, but they want to drag them into today.
Nobody's trying to drag them into today. Or rather, actually, let me rephrase that. There are people trying to drag that into the day because Ghazi exists. That is a thing. There are people like Black Hitler himself, Ghazi, who are trying to drag every issue from before into today. Yes. That's not what CRT is doing. CRT is not trying to drag issues from before into today. They're looking at those issues and analyzing how much of an effect they did or did not have on people going forward, and largely finding that they have had an effect going forward.
And act like it's still going on when it's not. I'm not oppressed by anybody.
Amen. Amen.
Derek, voice.
You've got the approval of all the white people in the room. Congratulations, you've made it.
Voices like your own, I think, are often marginalized, not given the platform that I think, quite honestly, they deserve. Do you feel like the point of view that you...
Wait. Don't tell me that you're going to go with the you're definitely not oppressed, you're definitely not marginalized, and then out of the other side of your mouth say, people like you are not often able to get the platform. People like you are often marginalized away from getting the platform. Please don't tell me you're legitimately doing that when you're trying to suck each other's cocks about how racism is over. Please don't tell me that you did that with a smile on your face. That is absolutely fucking hilarious. Adria Gray, thank you very much for the follow.
You have embraced as a Black American, a descendant of slaves. Do you think the point of view that you espoused at that podium is representative of a larger percentage of the Black population in America than we might fully understand? Or are you more a lone voice out there pushing back on this idea that everyone is oppressed?
So, before he answers, I will go ahead and poison this well. His perspective on this particular point does not matter, because without actual data on how many people do or do not believe a thing, his answer will be out of his ass.
I think it's the former. I think there are more voices who truly understand what's happening, see what's happening, and want to do something about it, but they are not given a platform or a podium. I was invited on Fox and Friends this morning, and I'm grateful for that. It's 4:30 in the morning here, so we aren't getting off on the best foot.
So, you're definitely not marginalized. You're definitely offered all the exact same opportunities as everybody else. But, you're not often offered the platform. Now, this can be taken one of two ways. It can be taken the funny way, which is, I'm definitely not marginalized, and yet I'm marginalized off of the platforms. That's the funny way to take it. The most steel-manny way that we could take this is that the people who claim they're oppressed are more often given the platform. And that could also be what is meant here. So, I'm personally choosing to take it the Steelman-y way, because I think arguments are much stronger when you fight Steelmen. But I am willing to acknowledge, as I did earlier, that perhaps the phrasing here could have been better. And it's amazing how they keep on saying descendants of slaves.
But I'm grateful for that. But this phone call will not be coming from CNN. We know that. This phone call will not be coming from MSNBC. They have no desire to put people like me up front and center to say the things that I'm saying, because they want to maintain cattle on a vote farm.
No. Okay, so yes and no. Yes and no. Yes, that is a thing that is likely happening over at CNN, because CNN is partisan news. But no, it is not unique that Fox is grabbing you. What you need to understand is you are giving a very conservative opinion for everyone there. Fox wants you. There's nothing unique about you being brought on as the token black man in a room of white folks in suits. There's nothing unique about that when you consider what Fox's platform is. Just like there's nothing unique about CNN pushing, say, CNN pushing Joe Biden is not unique. We know that's what they're going to do. Fox News pushing Donald Trump is not unique. We know it's what they're going to do. There's nothing special about being on the other side of the coin. You're on a fucking coin either way.
And that's unfortunate, because ultimately the black community is the one that's suffering.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Derek, the
We
vote was
appreciate you getting up at 4:30, by the way.
We really do. The vote was 3-2. Were you surprised by that, by the way? So it is banned in your district for now, right?
It is banned for now, and in the neighboring district, District 20, the president has come out and verbally and said on camera with microphones rolling, CRT is not coming to this district either. There hasn't been a vote yet, but slowly but surely, parents are rising up, and we are pushing these school boards and letting these people know, look, you're elected representatives of the people, and this is what we want. If you don't like it, we'll vote you out. And the boards are beginning to respond.
So I do want to say, also, Hollow Heretic, thank you so much for the follow. But I do want to say, it astounds me how often people don't understand that were this any other issue, were this an issue of science, not wanting to teach evolution in the classroom, which is something that is argued at length in other states still. When it's issues like this, having a group of conservative Christian parents screeching about how you don't want to talk to your kids, most people would accept that, yeah, no, it doesn't fucking matter that you don't want to talk to your kids. It's scientific fact. You're going to accept it. You don't get to force your children into a fantasy land like I was forced into at PCA. But when it's CRT, because most people don't understand what the fuck that means, they're like, yeah, no, we don't want CRT here. I have to wonder, was it that CRT was being taught at your school and then now it's being ripped away after this vote? Or is it that CRT was never actually taught in your school, and the fact that you had a chance to look at those materials now as a parent didn't actually factor into any of this at all, and you just got really upset, and CRT didn't get a chance to be taught in your district in any way, shape, or form? I'm curious if CRT was actually taught in Colorado. If you are part of the Colorado education system and you are listening in on this, and you are part of District 20 or District 12 or whichever districts they happen to be in, don't dox yourself. Please don't. But I would like perspective if possible, because from what I understand about CRT, how it functions, how it's taught, none of that shit's happening in many of these places. Maybe I'm wrong, but if you're being taught that, oh, you're oppressed, chances are you're not being taught critical race theory. That's something entirely different that Fox and other organizations have managed to thoroughly buzzword. But that's pretty much the end of that video. I want to know what you guys think. Not only do I want to know from people who might be participating in these education systems in some way, shape, or form, but I want to know what you think in general about the idea of basically bringing on a token black guy to talk about how racism has been dead for 50 years. I feel like, personally, that feels like a ridiculously privileged position to think that racism just up and died, despite the fact that, especially here, there's this, not consensus, but there's this idea that the difference between a black person and an N-word is whether or not they participate in a protest. That's a legitimate conversation I've had with someone that I still think back on to this day as so astounding. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. I want to know, and if you want to support this channel and what I do, then there are always ways to do so in the description. As always, everyone, insert into video tagline.